Check this out. My father bought this chair when he moved away from home in the late 1950s. It's an outstanding example of Danish design and Danish craftsmanship. This video is about creating a home for pieces like this. Now, you don't have to build grand designs or extraordinary homes or iconic buildings. I believe that architecture is everywhere. Let me explain. Even the smallest standard house can hold beautiful spaces and delicate experiences. Maybe architecture is only in your head. Maybe you're hotwired to recognize architecture anywhere. Maybe that's what evolution has given us after millions and millions of years. We just know when a space is good, and we know when a space isn't. This house wasn't. Not in a big way, just in a subtle, under the radar kind of way. I've worked with buildings that had heaps of unreflected spaces. Walls, doors, interiors just jumbled all together. They're often easy to cut into, to carve away in, to create architecture in, to create new spaces and new flows. This wasn't like most. It was a lot less loud, but the potential was just as great, only in a more subtle and delicate way. When I was a teenager, my family moved from one part of the country to the other. As a teenager, I had to figure out how to navigate a completely new flock of friends and how to build new relationships. I found that pretty hard, but what I gained from it was an acute and heightened sense of empathy. And that empathic ability is something I use every day when I sit down with clients. And I believe that was exactly what this house needed. So I listened to the client and to the house. It became apparent that the house was more than just a house. It was a piece in a collection of late 1950s design. By far the biggest piece, but a piece nonetheless. So any kind of renovation of this house would have to be delicate and subtly support the collection of art pieces. I was essentially tasked to create a container that would not only support but also be supported by the collection of pieces. I would have to co-create. I would have to co-create between the house, the client, and me. And in that way I would have to find some pretty subtle effects to work the architecture into this house in order to bring it out from under the radar. The tools I chose were laying out axes enhanced by light. Now the house has an angle layout, and I identified 3 main axes that I wanted to elevate to the visitor's attention. Now the main one begins at the entrance. It welcomes you and gives you a view down the entire length of the house. Along the view you get this light from unseen windows, hinting at spaces you haven't seen yet, hopefully getting you intrigued enough to move along the axis into the house. The light along the axis is not full-blown head-on headlights shining you in the eyes, but much more a side light, almost like an ephemeral light just flowing elegantly from the windows. Now the main axis is being disrupted by 2 main axes. The first one is pretty easy. It's down this hallway and we put in a light at the end. So when you pass this intersection, the disrupting axis is going to tell you, come down here. From this clearing down here, you will be able to access further spaces. The second disruptor wasn't as obvious when we planned the renovation. The layout of the living room and connected dining room was already here, trying to create a perpendicular axis, but not quite succeeding. Instead, this big window to the terrace claimed all the attention. We needed something to balance that, something to get you to face the other direction. The solution was a big framed view of greens upon greens. We humans love those colors, so we planned for green tinted light to saturate the space. Now the attention is balanced on the disrupting axis, guiding you either to the living room or to the kitchen via the dining room. Imagine the space you meet when walking with your groceries from the entrance to the kitchen. Enter, small clearing, filtered light, big clearing, vegetation, and kitchen. Subtle, nature-like diversity. Now, if you want to try this at home, you need to identify where you have your axis. You might only have one, or you may have more. An axis is always a straight line. Now, a good way to start is to go into your entrance and see if there's not an axis right there. Probably there is, but there might not be a light at the end. And you'll need that light because that's going to draw you along the axis. So, for now, you can put up a floor standing lamp or any kind of artificial light. Maybe later you can consider putting in a window, or if it's a door, putting in a glass door so you actually get the light from the room behind it. Now when you move along this axis, maybe that's all you have. Maybe you have other disrupting perpendicular axes in your house. Now when you stand at that intersection between two axes, you do the same. You look at the end of the second axis and see if there's a light. If there's no light, create something down there. In that way, you can actually start to have light and axes guide you through the house. That's pretty neat. And that's very much architecture. Now, if you want to see more like this, please subscribe and see you in the next one.